So when there's emergency and response and cleanup and permanent solutions attained often, there's that interim piece, which we always try to encourage, and that is getting in front of releases so we can actually minimize injury to the resources and less potential damages owed through a restoration, through a NRD claim. So with that, it's a perfect segue between Kathy and Michelle. Michelle is going to provide us with a report out for this calendar year 24 regarding the Natural Resource Damages Program, which has been extremely successful, and no better advocate for the environment than Michelle. So with that, Michelle, kindly please come to the virtual podium.
Thank you, Millie. Happy to be here. As Millie said, my name is Michelle Craddock, and I coordinate the Natural Resource Damages Program at MassDEP, located in the Boston office. And I'm just going to give you some quick kind of program highlights for calendar year 2024. So I'm going to start off by talking about new settlements reached this year. We settled one NRD claim this year, and that was for a 2018 oil release into Great Harbor in Woods Hole in Falmouth. So in this case, there was a marine vessel named Ocean King that released fuel into the harbor. That fuel coated the shoreline. It created a sheen over a large expanse of the harbor, which led to the closure of recreational shellfish beds, as well as injury and death to a variety of migratory birds. So we entered a $100,000 NRD settlement in 2024. This was kind of in addition to a larger settlement with the U.S. Coast Guard for recouping response-related costs. And additionally, a couple of years earlier, there was a MassDEP administrative consent order with penalty for this release as well. So we obtained $100,000, but working with our other trustee agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we were able to secure an additional $285,000 in funding to be used towards restoration associated with this injury. And that funding came from the National Natural Resource Damages Program through the U.S. Department of the Interior. So that was the only settlement we had this year. We do have another settlement that I'm hoping will be made public, hopefully in December, and if not December, early January. So once we have that consent decree finalized, it'll be posted for public comment, and hopefully we can put out some good press about that one. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about restoration planning and solicitations. And so this is something we've been spending a fair amount of time on this year in the NRD program. So kind of after we have a settlement, when there's a joint settlement with a federal agency, we have to go through a formal restoration planning process that's detailed in the CERCLA regs, as well as some additional DOI NRD regulations. So this year, or last year in 2023, we reached a $5.38 million settlement associated with the Gloucester Harbor coal tar site, obviously in Gloucester. There was injury there to sediment and surface water in Gloucester Harbor due to operations at a former manufactured gas plant there. So we received the settlement funds in 2023 and began the restoration planning process this year, this fall. We hosted a public meeting back in October at NOAA's offices in Gloucester, had about 30 people in person, 20 people online, where we detailed the settlement, the restoration planning process, and the types of projects we're looking for, as well as released kind of the process to submit project ideas to us. So there's an online portal where folks can submit project ideas up until December 20th, 2024, after which the trustees will evaluate any proposed projects and will put together a draft restoration plan for public comment. followed by release of a final restoration plan, and then finally implementation of the selected restoration projects. We've quickly jumped into the same process with those funds from the Woods Hole fuel release. So again, that was reached in 2024. We just held a public meeting in November, a virtual public meeting, and that project solicitation will remain open until January 13th, 2025, and then kind of same process of evaluating projects, drafting a restoration plan, and soliciting public comments and issuing a final restoration plan, and then implementing restoration. So very excited about those. Additionally, in early 2024, the trustees for the Bouchard B-120 oil spill released their final restoration plan associated with that settlement. And so that was for restoration of terns and shoreline and wetland habitat on Ram Island in Mattapoisett. That's the final restoration plan. So the final kind of step in that process I was just talking about. That plan details the trustees' intent to spend $5.5 million towards a project on Ram Island that will restore nesting habitat, salt marsh, and shoreline habitat. And so we're working with Mass Wildlife currently, who owns the island, to put out an RFR for design and permitting of those projects. And then hopefully we'll get to construction in the next 2 to 3 years. And finally, we released earlier this fall a grant solicitation associated with an acid spill that happened in Colrain back in 2019. We received a $225,000 settlement there. This was a state-only settlement, so we don't need to go through that formal restoration planning process that we did for the 3 cases I mentioned previously. So for this, we're just able to issue a grant solicitation for restoration projects that restore the injured natural resource. And so that solicitation closed last Friday. And so we're hoping to have an announcement on potentially funded project in the next 2 to 3 months will be my guess. Next slide, please. We also, have a lot of active grants going on. So ongoing grants, a lot of our grants cover multiple years of funding, as well as some new grants that we began this year. So I'm not going to run through all these grants on the slide, but I think, one of the ones we're really excited about that's really active right now is associated with the Industriplex NRD settlement, where we received just under $5 million. We have grants with the city of Winchester and city of Woburn. The map on the right kind of shows a conceptual design of the restoration there. We have $2 million to spend to kind of convert a really channelized, not very healthy stream channel and wetland habitat into a more natural kind of sinuous path and restore the native vegetation and ecological function there. And so we've provided grants to do design and permitting. And then once that is complete, we'll move into construction funding, which we hope will happen next year. Additionally, we provided a grant this year to the Lowell Parks and Conservation Trust to improve fish passage through a new fish passage channel at the Centennial Dam in Lowell, and that's utilizing Nyanza settlement funds. And additionally, a new grant this year was provided to the town of Tewksbury to do some wetland and groundwater restoration on 2 town-owned properties. And so we have a grant with them for design and permitting. And then once that's completed, we'll likely issue another grant for construction fundings there. There's a couple other grants on the screen that, I'm not going to talk through them, but just to kind of point out that, we are actively implementing restoration across the state, and it remains a big part of the natural resource damages program. And, to me personally, one of the funnest and most rewarding parts. Next slide. And this is my last slide. I just want to provide a couple kind of highlights of restoration implementation for projects that were implemented this year or wrapped up this year. So the first is the outer Boston Harbor Islands cleanup, which was partially funded using funds from the Bouchard B-120 settlement. The Bouchard B-120 settlement was obviously in Buzzards Bay, or was for an oil spill in Buzzards Bay. But as you can imagine, there was injury to a wide variety of bird species, many that also use Boston Harbor. And so that settlement detail, or the restoration plan detailed that we would spend some funds in Boston Harbor to benefit common eider. So we provided some funding towards this really large kind of multi-million-dollar project to clean up the Boston Harbor's outer islands. There hasn't been a cleanup on these islands ever. They're kind of billing it as a once-in-a-generation cleanup. So it was really nice to be able to provide some funding from an NRD settlement to go towards that, as well as be part of it. It was a larger project with National Park Service, Boston Harbor Now, NOAA, Department of Conservation and Recreation, and the Center for Coastal Studies. The NRD funds actually went towards the volunteer-based efforts out there. So there was several volunteer days where folks were able to go out to these islands and participate in the cleanup. I was able to go one day, and it was a really, really neat experience. I had, no idea the amount of debris that accumulated on these islands, and we were able, the amount of styrofoam and plastic that's been there for clearly probably decades that we were able to remove was really, really neat. So definitely encourage you to get out there if you can. I know overall, some of the programs were focused on removing large debris with cranes and barges. It was a very big effort. And as recently I know is that over 40,000 pounds of debris were removed off of 5 of these Boston Harbor islands. So really, really impressive. And we're hoping this continues into the future. There's additionally some bird monitoring for common eiders that's going along with this to hopefully see the positive impacts of the cleanup on these birds that are, essentially had been nesting and feeding in the debris. Additionally, this year in 2024, we wrapped up a 5-year watershed education program that we were funding Mass Audubon to complete out in the Housatonic River. So this was funded with GE Housatonic NRD settlement funds, and Mass Audubon's been spending the last 5 years kind of developing and implementing and piloting various environmental education programs in the Housatonic River watershed. So just some quick kind of program statistics, but Mass Audubon was able to reach 347 classrooms from 22 schools over that 5-year period to bring environmental education to them. They conducted 25 community education and stewardship events. They were able to pilot a nature camp feasibility study, as well as a pilot program. And because of kind of this, the money that the NRD program gave them, they were able to leverage significant additional fundings through ARPA, as well as, I believe, the MVP program, so that they could expand this education as well as continue it into the future. So they received enough funds from ARPA that this pilot program they did for a summer camp is going to be able to be continued into the future to benefit the kids in the Housatonic River watershed. So we're really excited about that project and it finally wrapping up this year and be able to see how successful it was. And those are all my highlights for 2024, but hopefully more coming soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and for all your hard work. I was really inspired this week when I visited the Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown, and Mr. Richard Delaney was highlighting and just singing the praises of MassDEP, and specifically you, Michelle, alongside with Laura Ludwig, who is the person running point, the scientist running point under Marine Debris and Plastics program. And just thinking about, the work and your representation of MassDEP at the Boston Harbor's Island cleanup, just to think about considering, over 76 volunteers and, over 2,000 volunteer hours, 300 lobster traps retrieved from the water and returned back to the fishing community, 86 super sacks of debris and over 1,600 pounds of styrofoam collected. That's just amazing how we're able to capture, reuse, and divert all of these materials to landfill space that we don't have. So it's all just so connected with the environment and our mission to not just emergency response and be there and clean up, but also to reuse and restore our precious resources. I'm so grateful. And it's really just a proud moment. We can say we're part of the community. just making the planet a lot better. So thank you, Michelle. Much appreciated. Sincerely.